united forever in friendship and labor, our mighty republics will ever endure. The great Soviet Union will live through the ages, the dream of a people, their fortress secure. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live her people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shining in glory for all men to see. Through days dark and stormy, while great Lenin led us, our eyes saw the bright sun of freedom above, and Stalin, our leader, with faith in the people, inspired us to build the land that we love. For the future, destroyed the invader, and brought to our homeland the laurels of fame. Her glory will live in the memory of nations, and all generations will honor her name. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live her people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shining in glory for all men to see.
Hello, comrades. We are going to carry on with our discussion on theories of restoration. Today, we're going to look at three different approaches as regards the theories of restoration, which are all based on one approach. We have seen that by 1957, our world communist movement had betrayed Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism, communism, and thus Lenin-Stalin plan of victory of world proletarian revolution, world communism. If we look at this moment as it was in 1957, we can see that there is actually no difference amongst them as regards the plan of building socialism, communism. It is pure and simple to type plan of building socialism, communism. Thus, it is Trotskyite plan of building socialism, communism, and that lead them to their Titoite, Trotskyite plan of world proletarian revolution, world communism. When the differences arise, and thus when differing and indeed opposing lines, namely antagonistic lines, and thus movements arise, all these are based on this Titoite, Trotskyite base. Let us see what they are. First one is known as the pro-Soviet line, pro-Soviet movement. This movement, right from the start, tramples underfoot the last Stalin 5-year plan of building communism, not building socialism, for socialism have already been built in the USSR. And with this tramples underfoot Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism, communism. With it, of course, the Lenin-Stalin plan of the victor of the world proletarian revolution, world communism, is also thrown overboard. If we know nothing, we know this, that after Lenin's death, the enemies of Leninism proposed that Lenin is not a god and thus could be criticized and could be a subject of discussion by all and on all matters. We know that behind this seemingly innocent proposal lay the desire of enemies of Leninism to distort Leninism, to distort the line of the party, to distort Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism, communism, and thus Lenin-Stalin plan of victor of world proletarian revolution, world communism. Comrade Stalin told them that is exactly what they are trying to do, and they themselves have been thrown overboard by the party. Their plan of attacking Leninism and Lenin was defeated. They were not allowed to discuss Lenin and Leninism. But after Comrade Stalin died, the enemies of Leninism, Stalinism, did not only propose to discuss Stalin, did not only propose that all should be able to discuss him, his views, his line, they actually attacked him in all sorts of most disgusting ways. With the main aim of distorting and destroying the Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism, communism, and the Lenin-Stalin plan of victor of the world proletarian revolution, communism. Comrades from pro-Soviet line, pro-Soviet movement knows this. They do not oppose this. Thus, they themselves are nothing but enemies of Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism, communism, and the Lenin-Stalin plan of victor of the world revolution, world communism. They have, of course, this line of defense. They say, we are the defenders of Soviet Union against its enemies. We are the defenders of the party line and party discipline. While those who oppose the Soviet Union of Khrushchev and Brezhnev and Gorbachev are traitors to the cause. Now, they would have been right. Had the CPSU leadership been defending Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism and communism, and the Lenin-Stalin plan of victor of the world proletarian revolution, world communism. But the Communist Party of Soviet Union leadership was not doing so. They were opposing these lines. They were most clearly engaged in destroying the Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism and communism, and the Lenin-Stalin plan of victory of the world proletarian revolution, world communism. They were most clearly engaged in destroying socialism in the USSR and preparing the ground and working to achieve its destruction, and thus preparing the ground and working to achieve the destruction of world proletarian revolution, world communism. The defenders of Soviet Union, in line with the line of Communist Party of Soviet Union's leaders, were engaged in the same act of betrayal themselves. Did they notice? As we said before, it matters not if they did not know or if they did know. They did it, and that is what matters. If they did not know what they had been doing, and one realize one's mistakes, one can always correct oneself. We do not see them trying to correct their mistakes. Does anyone? This moment, this group used to declare that the restoration of capitalism in the USSR is impossible. Well, that makes sense, does it not? It's not Tito line, which is a Trotsky line, a line of restoration of capitalism in the Yugoslavia? Yes, it is. Do these comrades declare this line to be one of the ways of building socialism, Yugoslav way of building socialism? Yes, they do. Do they not, following this declared, the Chinese line, the Mao line, which is almost the same as Yugoslav and Tito way of building socialism, is Chinese way of building socialism? Yes, they did. If even Tito, this Anglo-American spy, is a line of restoration of capitalism, can be declared as a builder of socialism. If different ways of restoration of capitalism can be declared ways of building socialism, even a spy-led restoration of capitalism can be declared a way of building socialism, no wonder these comrades think that it is impossible to restore capitalism, whatever one does. Even when what one does can do nothing but lead to the restoration of capitalism. Well, even if one is a spy of Anglo-American imperialism. Disregard the priority development of means of production, this law of economics, first openly, and then accept it in words while doing things to undermine it in practice, and at the same time keep declaring that capitalism cannot be restored. Disregard the product exchange between industry and kolkhozes. Declare it as a stupidity par excellence and demand nothing but commodity exchange, and take it further and declare that even under communism, there will be commodities and commodity exchange. And at the same time, keep declaring that capitalism cannot be restored. Declare that each unit of production must be profitable within itself, and disregard the national profitability altogether, although it is the most important form of profitability under socialism. Thus, block the technological advance of the production and block planning, and at the same time keep declaring that capitalism can be restored, cannot be restored. Sell the MTSs, machine and tractor stations, to the kolkhozes, thus block the development of production technique of agriculture, and cut the relationship between the industrial workers of cities and kolkhoz peasants provided by MTSs of rural areas, and develop commodification of the relations of town and countryside instead of narrowing in getting rid of this commodification. And furthermore, when the colossus cannot pay the money they borrowed from the banks to buy the MTSs, tell the banks to be profitable themselves. They must confiscate the colossus. That is why Khrushchev was toppled. And at the same time, keep declaring that capitalism cannot be restored. Misuse our reserves to provide plenty of consumer goods, however temporary, and end up devaluating the ruble and increasing the prices. And at the same time, keep declaring that capitalism cannot be restored. Hide away computerization, thus block full automation, thus abundance, thus high culture for all, thus full accounting and control by all, thus development of democracy to the level of direct democracy by all, thus make communism impossible, and at the same time keep declaring that capitalism cannot be restored, etc., etc. For there is no end to their distortion of our theory and practice. And at the same time, they keep declaring that capitalism cannot be restored. Clearly, if everything done to restore capitalism, everything done to distort our line is called either building socialism, as in the case of Yugoslavia, or building communism, as in the case of USSR during Khrushchev time, or building developed socialism during Brezhnev's time, even during Gorbachev's time, then it is obvious that these comrades cannot see any restoration of capitalism anywhere and anytime. Whatever done in the USSR, in the people's democracies, and whatever done all around the world by the parties not yet in power, all of which are betrayers of our line, are Trotskyism par excellence, and thus restoration of capitalism and destruction of world proletarian revolution and world communism. And all these are declared to be the defense of world communism. No wonder that they declare that capitalism cannot be restored, come what may. This, of course, is not just a matter of restoration of capitalism in the USSR and people's democracies, and the destruction of world communism, destruction of all our parties. It's also, and at the same time, the very defense of world imperialism that was and is facing total destruction. Well, come what may, the world imperialism and with it all its defenders will be destroyed. World communism will be established, and full automation of production and abundance for all, and peace for all, and direct democracy by all will be achieved. If we are the defenders of this line, either make your self-criticism and join the united communism, or be forever damned. The second approach to the restoration of capitalism is known as the pro-China line movement. Now let us ask ourselves, did the Communist Party of China and Comrade Mao ever objected to any of these and more? No, I repeat, no. Neither did Albanian Labour Party and Comrade Enver. Objection to the law of priority development of production, of means of production, as expressed by Malenkov in August 1953, is openly defended by Communist Party of China and Comrade Mao. His infamous policy of walking on two legs, one leg being development of heavy industry and the other leg being development of consumer goods, is nothing but the defense of Malekov's view on the priority of development of production of consumer goods. This walking on two legs is nothing but declaration of non-priority of development of means of production. And we know that this view is exactly what the defenders of the pro-Soviet line defended, either directly or indirectly. How did Khrushchev met the requirements of the line of priority development of means of production of heavy industry while actually undermining it? By production of tractors, thus production of all the factories to produce these tractors. By production of artificial chemical fertilizers, thus production of all the factories to produce these artificial fertilizers. And of course, by production of war machines, thus production of all the factories to produce these war machines. And that, not just but to give these war machines cheaply states. And many other production facilities were provided for anti-communist bourgeois states in the name of non-capitalist development of so-called independent states. Making sure that priority development of machine building machines is disregarded, our technological development is disregarded, our computerization, our automation is disregarded. This is Khrushchev and others. And how does Comrade of our Albanian Labour Party and Comrade Enver meet his priority development of means of production? As we said before, by declaration that extraction industry, mining industry, whose machinery has to be imported, has priority. And Albanian Labour Party and Comrade Enver declare this to be the way one meets the demands of the law of priority development of the means of production. By following this line of Comrade Enver, can you build your independent industry that is also capable of supporting agriculture and providing the means of defense of your country? No, you cannot. If you cannot do so, can you build socialism? No, you cannot. Only through the support of other and already industrialized socialist countries can you build socialism, and that is part of the union of socialist countries, is one part of the cooperating socialist countries. And if you find yourself in this situation, you should be more careful than anybody else that the motherland of socialism, USSR, is not lost to traitors. It is not diverted from the line of building socialism, communism of Lenin and Stalin, and thus from the line of world communism. If you do not object to the diversion of our motherland from the building of communism and the support of communism all around the world, if you do not object to traitors to communism, divert our motherland, USSR, from building communism, nay more, joining them by proposing such views, you cannot build your socialism, you cannot have a socialist country. These parties and these countries, Communist Party of China and Albanian Labour Party, that could not build socialism abiding with such economic laws and did not build socialism, and by doing so, and as a matter of fact, defended the line of Yugoslav way of building socialism, which is nothing but restoration of capitalism, turn around and declare that Soviet Union became capitalist and social imperialist as soon as Khrushchev and gang took over the Communist Party of Soviet Union and Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Just as the declaration that capitalism cannot be restored, come what may, makes sense for the so-called pro-Soviet comrades, because to them, even the line of restoration of capitalism is but building in defense of socialism. So the declaration that Soviet Union became capitalist and social imperialist as soon as Khrushchev and gang took over CPSU and USSR makes sense for these comrades. For these comrades, no socialism can be built without the bourgeoisie and antagonists. If your socialism is a socialism with the bourgeoisie, you declare Stalin's socialism is a socialism with a bourgeoisie, just like your socialism. From here, it goes on like this. If you are in power, this socialism with the bourgeoisie is socialism par excellence. But it is capitalism, it is social imperialism, if Khrushchev, Brezhnev are in power. In fact, for Tito version of this approach, if Stalin is in power too, but then should not one be consistent like Tito and say that even if Stalin is in power, that there is not socialism, but capitalism, social imperialism. For after all, he did not walk on two legs, did he? And he did not declare priority of heavy industry as priority of mining, like you. All varieties, and there are many of these, pro-China line, pro-China movement, transfer pre-1953 determinations of Comintern in relation to Yugoslav mode of restoration of capitalism to USSR. But take note, they never ever refer to the economic reasons given by Comintern as to why the line of Tito would lead to restoration of capitalism. And they never ever refer to the specific form of bourgeois nationalism that would lead the Tito line to the restoration of capitalism. All they repeatedly and endlessly repeat is that Tito and gang took over and capitalism was restored in Yugoslavia. They want us to forget the fact that in Yugoslavia, there was bourgeoisie, mostly in the countryside, the kulaks, but even in the towns. That Yugoslavia did not yet achieve industrialization. It did not have its own independent industry, did not have an industry that could support the countryside, the peasants in transition to socialism, and most certainly did not have the largest production units in the world. The proposals of Tito to get rid of exploiting classes and all bureaucracy was thus, at best, a petty bourgeois adventurism. And of course, would lead the kulaks dominating the countryside, and with their close connection to other imperial powers, would lead to bourgeoisification of the industries and commerce owned by the state too, especially coupled with the so-called independency of each industrial unit as regards planning and profitability, and as regards the so-called ownership by its workers. We also know that Yugoslav way of restoration of capitalism declares itself to be equally distant from Soviet and United States of America. And as a matter of fact, Yugoslavia is one of the leaders of the so-called non-aligned movement of the Third Roaders. And this demand for separate development from other socialist countries, especially from USSR, self-reliance, as some calls it, represents nothing but a bourgeois nationalism. And this can represent nothing but dependence on USA. And this dependence on USA had also happened in Yugoslavia. And of course, in the case of Yugoslavia, all of this was coupled with attack upon Stalin and USSR and people's democracies, and all our parties all around the world. And of course, an attack on the communists in Yugoslavia in a most vicious form. It is thus that Yugoslavia is transformed into a vicious anti-communist and thus a vicious fascist state. This pro-China group, without much reference to the economic position of Yugoslavia, and while agreeing to all the policies of Tito as one of the ways of building socialism, starting from 1955, well, in fact, starting from August 1953, and equating this relatively backward country to the most developed country on earth, Soviet Union, declares that all developments that occurred in Yugoslavia occurs in the USSR too. As regards economics, just as Yugoslavia, USSR too is transformed into a capitalist state as soon as Khrushchev takes over. And since it is one of the most powerful countries on earth, into an imperialist one, social imperialist one. And as regards bourgeois nationalism, do not mention the self-reliance, since USSR is more than self-reliant. It supported and supports all others, for it is a great power, and that is social imperialism, pure and simple, and thus it is nationalism in the form of great Russian nationalism. Such is the logic of this course. They forget, or rather, they distort that. USSR got rid of the exploiting classes. No more bourgeoisie in the USSR. USSR built its independent industry and in fact had the most developed technique of production on earth and the largest units of production on earth, including in agriculture. And in fact, in industry and commerce and through state farms, in a large section of the agriculture too, had one employer, socialist state. All units of production mentioned unified through its ownership of the state and through its planning, through its central planning. Not only USSR did not really have to buy and sell anything from the imperialist markets, and Nemo was able to make sure the socialist market is built and could survive and develop fast under its leadership and through providing the socialist market with all its needs. They also forgot that the best and the strongest communist party was the Communist Party of Soviet Union. The best socialist state of the working people was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which also belonged to the proletariat and working people of the whole world. And the best working people in the whole world, imbued with Soviet patriotism, which is the proletarian internationalism, lived in the USSR. And let us not forget that proletarians and oppressed nations all around the world considered the USSR to be their own motherland. And one should never forget the people's democracies either. For these communists kept forgetting it. Thus, we see that this pro-Chinese, pro-Albanian line is their approach to the economic laws of socialism, and with their socialism, with the bourgeoisie and antagonisms, and having to import their machinery from abroad, are actually propagating the same line as pro-Soviet line. This antagonism between these two lines is the antagonism of the same mistaken line. The antagonism of these lines is the antagonism of wrong lines originating in Tito Trotsky and meeting at Tito Trotsky. Have a look at Tony Cliff, the Trot, and see that these people are following in the wake of Tony Cliff and his state capitalism under Stalin. Everything they have proposed and done is just like their comrades in crime, the pro-Soviet movement, and the Trots of all views. Is a distortion of Lenin-Stalin line of building socialism, communism, and thus the distortion of Lenin-Stalin plan of victory of the world proletarian revolution and world communism. And the third approach, it is called middle of the roaders approach. Who are the middle of the roaders? Who are called by these two opposing antagonistic lines representing the pro-Soviet and pro-China line, as they are known, as middle of the roaders. By the way, there is nothing pro-Soviet or pro-China in the line of these comrades, these two opposing lines. Could it be that they call everybody to defend the Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism, communism, and Lenin-Stalin plan of the victory of the world proletarian revolution, world communism, as middle of the roaders? Unfortunately not. They have not been called middle of the roaders for their defense of Lenin-Stalin plan of building socialism, communism, and Lenin-Stalin plan of the victory of the world revolution, world communism. They have been called middle of the roaders by the so-called pro-Soviet and pro-China movements for not supporting each of them wholeheartedly and opposing the other wholeheartedly. If you object to any of the sayings of a sect, be it religious, be it political, or indeed, if your interpretation does not coincide totally with their interpretation of the sectarial line, you end up being rejected. With the pro-Soviet and pro-China lines, one already sees many a variety and enmity within each movement arising from such different interpretations. Middle of the roaders come into being as movements that criticize both movements mentioned above. But do take note that middle of the roaders themselves differentiate into many groups whose enmity to each other knows no bounds. God save the one from the wrath of a sect, if it is a religious issue. And see if Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin can save you from the wrath of a political sect. Unfortunately for us, although movement known as the middle of the roaders takes on board the wrongs of the both pro-Soviet and pro-China movements and attempts to find the correct path through this model. To them, Yugoslavia is a socialist. Just criticize them for mistakes the middle of the roaders may see. To them, USSR is socialist. Just criticize them for the mistakes the middle of the roaders may see. To them, Korea is socialist. Just criticize them for the mistakes the middle of the roaders may see. To them, Cuba is a socialist. Just criticize them for the mistakes the middle of the roaders may see. Just like the pro-Soviet movement, they see socialists wherever they look. And when they look more and more, just like the pro-China movement, they see nothing but revisionism, but with socialism. They are great conciliators who are not appreciated by both sides of the antagonists of pro-Soviet and pro-China movement. If only they could be understood and obeyed, all problems would have been resolved. We would have socialism led by third roaders, all uniting in the non-aligned movement under the leadership of Comrade Tito's Yugoslavia. We would have a self-reliant communism by each and every socialist country. This is proletarian internationalism of self-reliance of each country, big and small. Not denying the support of others, of course, for we are ready to agree to anything to achieve our self-reliance. Do we not? We shall build socialism even if we cannot build a machine, let alone not being able to build a machine. We cannot even repair the ones we have. But we can have a socialist country of no machines. We can teach all how to read and write. We can do doctors and sugar in plenty and complain about USA embargo after 30 years of USSR support and still no machine building capability. We must be socialist though, for we are but a member of non-aligned movement led by Tito. These comrades of the middle road combine the worst of the pro-Soviet and pro-China movements and claim that they are the solution to all our problems. Unfortunately for us, they do not solve our problems. They simply add to our problems. In the development of animal life on Earth, the transition from the lower to higher, this evolution always gives rise to a form of that mediates between the lower and the higher. This mediator contains the characteristics of the lower and the characteristics of the higher, even if not yet fully developed form. These mediators are a necessity for move to the higher form of life. But what we have here in this mediator is nothing of the sort. For both sides of the opposites are wrong, are distortions of Marxism, and the mediator between these two cannot but be wrong, a distorter of Marxism. We do not have a movement from lower to higher with our middle of the roaders mediating between the two. We have lower and lower and a mediator between the two lowest of the low. Every word uttered by the two opposing lines and their mediator is a step in the direction of reaction. Not only the two opposites are reactionary, so is the mediator. Not only the two opposites must be overcome. So one must overcome this mediator. There is no other way forward. Good day, comrades. We shall further look into the meaning of these lines and movements as to what we should do in our future talks.
United forever in friendship and labor, our mighty republics will ever endure. The great Soviet Union will live through the ages, the dream of a people, their fortress secure. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live our people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shining in glory for all men to see. Through days dark and stormy, while great Lenin led us, our eyes saw the bright sun of freedom above. And Stalin, our leader, with faith in the people, inspired us to build up the land that we love. For the future, destroyed the invader, and brought to our homeland the laurels of fame. Our glory will live in the memory of nations, and all generations will honor her name. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live her people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shine